Welcome to PE 589, Physical Education and Exercise Science Capstone, Spring of 2020 with Dr. Angela Robles. My name is Mandy Simon, and here is a brief introduction to my research project. The title of my capstone is Finding Freedom, Exploring the Barriers and Stereotypes that Student Female Athletes Face. The challenges that female athletes experience prevent women from feeling that they can be fully authentic. There's a significant shift in the way they live their daily lives in order for them to feel accepted. This has a negative effect on how they view themselves and their ability to feel comfortable in their own skin. The purpose of this study was to understand the barriers and stereotypes that female student athletes face at the community college level and finding out the needs of these athletes in order for them to experience freedom. The central research questions that this study examined are the following. What are some experiences that female student athletes have that they perceive as unique to them based on gender? What are some of the perceived barriers for female student athletes? What are some of the perceived stereotypes of female student athletes? And what do female student athletes perceive as their greatest needs in order to experience freedom? Looking at the research in the field of gender stereotypes, there was one study that looked at the stigma of girly girls and manly men. The purpose was to evaluate the level of a child's awareness on gender stereotypes and how it determines their participation in sport and in physical activity. The participants were 444 children, ages 8 to 10, and they were given a questionnaire that was adapted from the Stigma Consciousness Questionnaire. All children were also interviewed. The results showed that when they were asked why a girl sport was a girl sport and why a boy sport was a boy sport, most children couldn't answer. The data indicated that children are aware of gender stereotypes, but they didn't know the meaning behind them. The most prominent stigma across the board was homosexuality. The boys who participated in sports that were perceived for girls were labeled as gay, and the girls who participated in sports that were deemed more masculine were stigmatized as lesbians. Another research study on the topic of barriers took a deeper look at what discourages girls from playing sports. The purpose was to understand the issues that young girls face when deciding to be physically active and to find ways to develop interventions to increase the number of girls in sports. The participants were 30 girls between the ages of 15 and 16 from 2 different high schools. They were given multiple choice questionnaires and were also interviewed. The questionnaire covered aspects about participating, which included availability, views regarding girls' participation, and the perceived barriers to that participation. The results showed that there were 4 dominant reasons why girls chose not to participate in sports. 1 were internal factors, such as lack of confidence or pressure. 2 was the knowledge of existing stereotypes among female athletes. 3 was the lack of time due to other hobbies or other interests. And the last one were teachers. The teacher's perception of boys' teams overpowering the ability of girls. Here, we see how important the attitude of a teacher is, as well as others in society, and how it affects a young girl's decision to play sports. The third substantial research looked at the topic of femininity and examined how female athletes negotiate femininity and muscularity. The purpose was to investigate how female athletes negotiate social expectations of what is deemed to be feminine and still maintain athleticism. The participants were 21 NCAA Division I female athletes from a mixture of varsity and club sports. Interviews with participants were conducted and were also videotaped. The focus of discussion was centered on the perceptions of each athlete's body image, muscularity, and femininity. The results showed that the athlete's perception of the ideal body was not too much muscle, but still having definition. Most wanted muscular definition without the muscular bulk. And all athletes concluded that having a muscular, athletic body was a hindrance to being feminine or perceived as a normal girl. Due to the expectations of society, these athletes have developed 2 separate identities: athlete and woman. It is evident that feminine norms are deeply rooted in society. But this study showed that women in sport have accepted that their athleticism is not considered acceptable feminine behavior. However, most athletes have normalized it, which in turn has empowered them. To further investigate the challenges that female athletes face, I conducted my own research and developed a mixed methods research design. I contacted head coaches from women's athletic teams at 5 community colleges in Southern California. I asked these coaches to forward the survey to their athletes and encourage them to take part in the research study. Any athlete under the age of 18 was excluded. My email included a link to the survey on Google Forms, and I advised it would take 10 to 15 minutes to complete. After reading the electronic consent form, clicking the link confirmed their consent and sent them directly to the survey. The athletes were given 2 weeks to complete the survey online. The participants were female athletes ages 18 and up, enrolled at a community college in Southern California, and actively participating in a sport. Quantitative and qualitative data was collected through the survey that I titled The Freedom in Girls' Honest Thoughts. The survey itself consisted of 4 demographic questions, which gave us information on the participants' age, the school they attended, the sport that they played, and the number of years that they had experience in that sport. There were 5 true or false questions to understand the athlete's perceived barriers, 5 yes or no questions to understand the athlete's perceived stereotypes, 4 open-ended questions to gain insight on the unique experiences that these athletes had based on gender, and 4 open-ended questions to look into what the greatest needs are for these athletes in order for them to experience freedom. A total of 14 athletes decided to participate in the research study. Their ages were between 18 to 20. 7 of them were freshmen in college, and 7 were sophomores. The sports that were represented were water polo and swimming, and basketball. The experience ranged from 1 to 12 years. Let's take a look at the results.
I'm warning you.
I'm warning you. If you don't stall that bad attitude, no one's gonna recruit you.
Please. You jump in some guy's face, you talk smack, and you get a pat on your ass. But because I'm a female, I get told to calm down and act like a lady. I'm a ball player, okay?
The current study investigated the athletes' experiences as women and as athletes and found that most athletes experienced insecurities. The biggest insecurity revolved around femininity. Participants expressed that they have been given an ultimatum: be an athlete or a girly girl. The concept of both was not an option, which made it difficult for female athletes to feel accepted in society. Another insecurity was appearance. Athletes expressed the difficulties it was when deciding to dress comfortably or to dress in a way that was acceptable. Some even overdid a feminine look to avoid the lesbian stigma. Another common experience was the constant fight against gender norms. Most participants reported that they were labeled as a tomboy and many times were told to just act like a girl. Another challenging concept was defending their capabilities. One athlete expressed that at a young age, someone told her, "You can't play basketball, you're a girl." The last common experience based on gender was discrimination. One example was a girl who was on a co-ed soccer team when she was young, and her abilities were just as good, if not better, than her boy teammates, but she realized that she got little to no playing time because she was a girl. Another example one athlete expressed was being talked about behind her back by other girls because of her athletic ability and her skills. She was different than the other girls. It was hard being talked about for being good at sports, but also being talked about because you're a girl and not good enough. The last example was a water polo player who during a game got asked by a ref to not play so aggressive on her opponent. She thought to herself, "Would you be saying this to me if I were a man?" When the survey asked about perceived barriers and stereotypes, 71.4% of participants believed that there were unequal opportunities for male and female athletes. 85.7% believed that the media coverage was unequal. 42.9% stated that they were questioned about their sexual orientation because they participated in sports. And 57.1% were told that playing sports is not feminine. Half of the participants were told that they would be prettier if they weren't so strong. Interestingly enough, despite these negative experiences, 71.4% said that they were comfortable in their own skin and that this came over time by normalizing stereotypes and finding ways to cope. The athletes expressed that their greatest needs to experience freedom are changes in society and in themselves. One change from society was the need for recognition. The recognition of their accomplishments, which could be personally by family members or friends, or publicly through the media. They want their commitment and their hard work to be recognized as athletes. Another change was the need for equality. This includes equal treatment for male and female sports at their schools, equal media coverage, and also equal pay for professional athletes. The participants expressed a desire to not be compared to men. One athlete said that after she had a good game, someone approached her and said, "You played pretty good for a girl," and that mindset needs to change. Which leads me to the next greatest need, a change in mentality. In regards to people in society, the participants expressed that stereotypes need to be broken, and that being a female athlete does not mean you're a lesbian. Sexual orientation should not be based on the things that you do. And in regards to the change in mentality for themselves, participants emphasize the importance of adopting a mindset to not care what others think. As we discuss the results of the current study and compare them to previous published literature, we see that there are many similarities. The results in the current study found that female athletes experience insecurities that are tied to femininity and appearance. When it came to femininity, athletes were given an ultimatum: an aggressive athlete or a girly girl. And when it came to appearance, athletes found the difficulties in the way that they dress in order to look feminine, and they feared the lesbian stigma, or any stigma at all. This is similar to a previous study that looked at femininity, masculinity, and body image among college-age women and found that the terms related to body image were being too manly, not feminine enough in appearance, or perceived as lesbians. The researchers concluded that family, peers, and media all played a significant role in the concept that physical appearance is linked to femininity. The perceived barriers in the current study revealed that 85.7% of participants believed that the media was lower for female athletes than for males, and 71.4% believed that the opportunities for male and female athletes were unequal. Previous research supports this notion. A prior study specifically looked at the branding barriers for female athletes. Researchers found that marketers focus on promoting physical attractiveness rather than skill. While female athletes want to be recognized for their athleticism, performance isn't enough. The perceived stereotypes in the current study revealed that 42.9% of participants were questioned about their sexual orientation. 57.1% were told that participating in sports was not feminine. If more than half the participants are told that playing sports is not feminine, this creates a challenge to be socially accepted and still be an athlete. This concept is seen in another published study that explored the ways in which female college athletes negotiate femininity, negative stereotypes, and the lesbian stigma. Researchers found that the most time-consuming concern pertained to body image and the pressure to look a certain way. Athletes expressed the importance of knowing when to be feminine and when it was okay to be slightly less feminine. The most challenging thing that these athletes faced was the balance of being feminine enough to be socially accepted and still compete in an arena that was considered masculine. One of the most important pieces of the current study is finding out the greatest needs that female athletes need in order to experience freedom. The common themes that were found were recognition, equality, and mentality. The need for recognition includes recognizing the time and the effort and the commitment that these athletes put into their sport, as well as their accomplishments. When it came to equality, athletes expressed a strong desire to not be compared to men. They want to be told that they're good because they're good, not they're good for a girl. And the change in mentality was both for others and themselves. For others, society needs to change the way they view women and female athletes. And across the board, participants expressed that stereotyping needs to stop. As far as the change in mentality in themselves, most athletes stated that the best thing that female athletes can do for themselves is to refocus and not care what others think about them. A previous research study showed that 15 to 16-year-old girls chose not to participate in sports because of lack of confidence, stereotypes, embarrassment, and negative self-belief. It is evident that the mental warfare to participate in sports starts at an early age, and most factors are influenced by family and peers. Another research study specifically focused on rugby players and found that participating is actually what changed the athlete's self-image in a positive way and allowed them to gain confidence. The results indicated that the longer they played their sport, the easier it was to resist gender and sexuality domination by taking an unapologetic stance. The implications are for relatives, coaches, and men. Understanding the challenges that female student athletes face will bring awareness and sensitivity to the things that relatives say and how they raise young girls. Coaches need to lead by example and give young girls the confidence to be leaders themselves. Female role models are significant in developing female leaders. And as for men, there is no greater ally for female athletes than the opposite sex. When a woman speaks up for herself, she comes across as complaining or even nagging. But if society has made men the bar, when a man speaks up for a woman, he's more likely to be heard. There are 3 recommendations for future research. 1 is studying the perspective and perceptions of family and friends and how their stereotypes feed a child's opinions and their behaviors. Another recommendation would be to study a variety of sports to see where stereotypes are heavier. And lastly, taking a deeper look at the media and finding out if unequal media coverage is based on biological sex or sport type. In conclusion, it is clear that stereotypes still exist. It is vital for female athletes to use them as motivators to change society's perceptions. The current concept of femininity needs to be eradicated and expanded to include a variation. Institutions should offer workshops and counseling support to empower female athletes to fight against prejudices and stereotypes. Ultimately, we need to motivate young girls to pursue the things that they enjoy and not forcefully mold them into gender norms. We need to encourage more women to voice their experiences and actively seek change from society. And lastly, we need to empower female athletes to become leaders and carry on the fight for gender injustices within sports. Thank you for watching.
I think that being a female athlete is quite challenging because you have so many societal pressures going on to be feminine and to make sure that you look appropriate and act the right way.
I think there's less money that go towards women as individual athletes and as team sports.
Parents would yell at me and say, "Why is she here? She can't play." They would give me dirty looks. They just hurt my feelings, and it brought down my self-esteem and my self-worth.
When something is accomplished by female athletes, people look for excuses to explain why they were successful instead of just giving credit to their skill or to their talent.
Uniforms and practice clothing.
The biggest thing for female athletes is the lack of recognition.
What I think needs to change in order for female athletes to feel the freedom of being themselves is for there to be more female role models from different sports.
I think having a lot of females that are doing sports in colleges and in professional sports help a lot to build pathways to make it a norm.
I think there needs to be a greater appreciation and more genuine support from our society within women's sports. There needs to be an acknowledgement that our success is just as impressive as male success.
Having more conscious coaches that understand the job of an athlete and a female athlete to be specific, instead of just commenting on them as a body or as a distraction.
I would say the biggest thing is taking ownership, for your team.
And the coaches, we need to see more females, and we need to see more female refs in all sports, not just female sports, but in male sports as well. It would help younger, upcoming female athletes to see that their sport can be taken to the next level after collegiate athletes, but also to see more female coaches and more female refs, so that way they might feel a little bit more comfortable and confident.